The stars were quiet, too quiet. In the cold emptiness of space, silence was not peace. It was fear. Whole star systems had gone dark, their worlds turned to ash, their people erased as if they never existed. The enemy moved like shadows, striking without warning, leaving nothing behind but ruin. No empire dared to face them. No fleet could resist them. One by one, proud civilizations collapsed, their banners torn, their fleets scattered into dust. In a hidden outpost on the edge of a dying galaxy, a small group of alien survivors gathered around a trembling console. Their voices shook as they argued. Some shouted for surrender, others whispered of flight, but one elder raised his hand and said, "There is one chance left. We must send the signal." The others froze. They knew what he meant. A desperate plea across the stars. A cry for salvation sent not to allies, not to friends, but to the one species that terrified them all, humanity. The decision was not easy. To call the Deathworlders was to gamble with fate itself. They were whispered about in fear, spoken of as monsters who had risen from the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. To invite them meant to unleash something no one could control, but there was no choice left. So they sent it, a signal of desperation, a plea wrapped in sorrow. A single word repeated again and again, help. It traveled across the endless void, slipping past dying suns, ruined colonies, and broken fleets. Many who intercepted the signal ignored it. Some who heard it deleted it, afraid to even whisper its contents. But it did not stop. It traveled further, cutting across the galactic arms until it reached a small blue world that had always been underestimated. Earth. For a long time, there was silence. The galaxy held its breath. Maybe humanity would ignore it. Maybe the Deathworlders would laugh at the weakness of others and turn away. The aliens prayed, fearing the worst, but hoping for the impossible. On a hidden moon, the survivors watched their screens, and one night, the console flickered. A response. A simple coded message burned across the stars. "We heard you." The council froze. They could not believe it. Humanity had answered. But was it hope or doom? Rumors spread like wildfire across alien refugee camps. The humans had heard the call. Some fell to their knees in relief, while others shivered in terror. What if humanity came not to help but to conquer? What if the cure was worse than the disease? The Deathworlders were known for one thing above all else. When they moved, the galaxy trembled. The alien elder who had first spoken the words of the signal closed his eyes. Better to risk the wrath of Deathworlders than to die silent in the dark. And so they waited. Days passed, weeks passed, the survivors kept watching the skies. At first nothing came. The void was still empty, the enemy still circling like predators waiting to strike again. Many began to lose hope. Some whispered that perhaps humanity had listened and decided that the aliens were not worth saving. Then, everything changed. The first signs were subtle. Patrol ships reported shadows moving through distant sectors, massive objects slipping through hyperspace lanes, silent but unstoppable. Space stations picked up energy signatures unlike anything recorded before. Fleets of smaller empires tried to move aside, clearing space as if an unseen storm was about to pass. The galaxy had seen many armadas in its time, but this one was different. At the edge of alien space, the sky cracked open. A single ship appeared first. It was larger than anything the survivors had ever seen, its armored hull blackened from old battles, its cannons the size of towers. Its engines roared like thunder as it emerged from the void. It did not come alone. Behind it, more ships appeared, one after another, until the stars themselves seemed to vanish beneath their shadows. A fleet, no, a storm of warships. Humanity had come. The aliens trembled as they watched. This was no rescue fleet. This was not a gentle hand reaching out. This was a hammer, forged in war, carried by a species born on a death world where survival meant victory or death. And yet, even in their terror, the survivors felt something else. For the first time in countless years, they felt hope. Not because they believed humanity would show mercy, but because they knew humanity never ignored a challenge. If the Deathworlders had come, it meant they had chosen to fight. As the human fleet cut across the darkness, signals echoed across space, simple, cold, and final. "Hold your ground, reinforcements have arrived." The survivors looked to the stars and whispered the truth that spread across the galaxy. The Deathworlders had answered, and somewhere in the vast silence, the enemy finally hesitated, because when humanity moved, the galaxy itself shivered. The galaxy had heard the rumors. Whispers spread from world to world, through hidden channels, smuggler ships, and refugee camps. "The Deathworlders are coming." The phrase repeated like a warning, like a prayer, like a storm cloud rolling in from a horizon no one could see. In the council chambers of broken empires, the alien leaders argued. Some believed humanity's fleet would bring salvation. Others were sure it would bring destruction far worse than the enemy itself. Every alien species had old tales about Earth, tales of a harsh world where even the trees poisoned, the air burned, and predators hunted endlessly. If such a world could forge a civilization, what kind of warriors would rise from it? The answer was now moving through hyperspace, but before the fleet arrived in full, silence ruled the void. A strange, heavy silence. Enemy scouts continued to move across the stars, yet their raids slowed. The predators who had swept aside empire after empire seemed to pause. It was as though they too had heard the rumors. No alien had ever seen the enemy hesitate. Until now. On a refugee station orbiting a ruined planet, a young alien child asked his mother, "Is it true? Will the Deathworlders save us?" The mother could not answer. She remembered stories of humans fighting wars not for conquest but for survival, wars that shook entire star clusters. To call them saviors was dangerous. To call them monsters was not entirely wrong. She simply held her child and whispered, "We will soon see." Meanwhile, hidden transmissions crackled across alien networks. Smugglers reported strange sightings. Massive, human carriers moving in formation. Destroyers gliding through deep space without broadcasting signals, and black warships cutting off entire sectors. The humans were not rushing. They were moving with purpose like hunters circling prey, and the galaxy trembled at the thought. For the survivors who had sent the desperate signal, every hour felt like eternity. They watched their sensors constantly, hoping for a sign. But days stretched into weeks. The council grew restless. Some accused humanity of deception, that perhaps the Deathworlders only wanted to study their misery. Others said humanity was gathering strength, preparing something even greater. One elder stood and reminded them, "Deathworlders are not like us. They do not rush blindly. They wait. They measure. They strike when the moment is perfect." His words brought no comfort, but deep inside, many felt he was right. Then came the first proof. An entire enemy raiding fleet had gathered near the rim of alien space, preparing to attack a defenseless colony. But before the raid began, every sensor on the enemy ship suddenly went dark. An unknown interference blinded them. Their systems scrambled. In confusion, they stumbled back, only to find themselves surrounded. Out of the void, black human, warships appeared, silent and merciless. No one saw the battle in full. Only fragments leaked through, the glow of burning ships, the shockwaves of detonations, and the screams of enemy captains begging for retreat. When the transmission cut off, all that remained was silence. The colony was untouched. The raiders were gone, and in their place, faint human beacons pulsed in orbit, marking the space as protected. The galaxy had its answer. Humanity had begun to move. Fear turned into something more complicated. In the halls of power, alien leaders argued no longer about if humanity would intervene, but how far they would go. Would they fight only to push back the enemy, or would they wage total war until nothing remained? Some prayed humanity would show restraint. Others prayed they would not. In the darkness of his chamber, the alien elder who had sent the desperate signal closed his eyes again. "This is the silence before the storm," he whispered. "When it breaks, the stars will burn." And still, the fleet drew closer. The silence finally broke. At first, it was only a faint tremor on long-range sensors, so weak that some thought it was an error. Then came the shift in gravity, the warping of space, the sudden surge of energy readings that spiked higher and higher. Refugee stations lit up with warning signals. Patrols scrambled to scan the disturbance. The void itself seemed to ripple. And then, the humans arrived. One ship appeared first. It was massive, larger than any alien battleship, its hull armored in black steel scarred from countless wars. The edges of its frame glowed faintly with the heat of re-entry, like a predator's eyes glinting in the dark. Its weapons stretched across its body like city towers, each one large enough to break a world. The ship's presence alone was enough to silence every voice in the control rooms watching from afar, but that was only the beginning. More ships followed, dozens, then hundreds. Carriers, destroyers, dreadnoughts, cruisers, an entire war machine poured out of hyperspace in disciplined formation. They moved with terrifying precision like soldiers, marching in step, their engines burning white against the black of space. The stars themselves seemed to vanish beneath their shadows. For those who watched, it was not a fleet. It was a storm. The survivors who had sent the desperate plea stared in disbelief. They had expected help, maybe a few ships, maybe a handful of cruisers sent as a token of protection. But this was something else entirely. Humanity had not come with mercy. They had come with the full force of a Deathworlder armada, the deadliest fleet the galaxy had ever seen. Among the alien refugees, fear mixed with awe. Some whispered prayers, others fell silent, and a few simply wept. The galaxy had always feared what humanity could become if unleashed. Now those fears were real. In the center of the formation was the flagship. Its size dwarfed every other vessel, its hull blackened yet unbroken, its command tower glowing faintly like a burning crown. This was no ordinary warship. It was a legend, spoken of only in rumors. Aliens had called it by many names: the Worldbreaker, the Steel Leviathan, the Sovereign of Deathworld. But to humans, it was simply indomitable. The flagship's voice echoed across every channel, a single transmission broadcast without emotion. "This sector is under Deathworlder protection. Stand aside or be destroyed." The enemy heard it. For the first time in recorded history, their fleet stopped advancing. They had never paused for anyone, never hesitated in their endless slaughter. But when the Deathworlder fleet appeared, the predators faltered. Their ships pulled back, their movements uncertain, as if even they could feel the weight of what stood against them. To the alien survivors, it was an impossible sight. The hunters who had devoured countless empires now hesitating before humanity. But the humans did not hesitate. Their ships spread into battle lines, weapons charging. Massive rail cannons lit up like suns, energy shields rippled across formations, and bombers swarmed from carriers like clouds of steel insects. Everything about the fleet spoke one truth: humanity was not here to negotiate. They were here to end the threat. Inside the Refugee Council chamber, the elder who had sent the signal leaned forward, his voice barely a whisper. They came. The Deathworlders truly came. Another counselor trembled. Will they save us, or destroy everything? The elder's eyes did not leave the screen. Both, perhaps. But one thing is certain: the galaxy will never be the same. On the battlefield, the void grew heavy with silence once more. The fleets faced each other across the stars, humanity's deadliest armada against an enemy that had never known defeat. The moment stretched on, long and tense, as if the galaxy itself was holding its breath. Then, the order came. The flagship Indomitable sent a single word across every human channel: advance. And the Deathworlder fleet began to move. The order was given, and the storm broke. Human warships surged forward in perfect formation, their engines blazing white fire against the darkness. Across the void, the enemy reacted, snarling into motion, their ships twisting like predators sensing blood. Thousands of vessels filled, The stars, two titanic forces rushing toward one another until space itself seemed to tremble. The first strike came from the humans. Massive rail cannons roared, launching slugs the size of buildings at near light speed. The projectiles cut through the dark like streaks of silver lightning, smashing into enemy ships and tearing them apart in a single blow. Whole cruisers split in half, their broken hulls spinning silently as debris scattered into the void. Then came the second wave. Missile swarms streaked from human carriers, each one splitting into dozens of smaller warheads that sought their targets with deadly precision. The enemy tried to block them with energy shields, but the missiles detonated in layered bursts, overwhelming defenses. The sky lit up with fire, 1,000 suns blooming all at once. The enemy roared back. Beams of plasma shot from their fleets, carving deadly arcs through the dark. Alien warships melted in the heat, their crews erased in seconds. For a moment, the Deathworlders disappeared in the blaze. Refugees watching the battle gasped, certain the human fleet had been struck down. But then the humans emerged from the fire. Their shields held, their hulls burned, but they did not fall. One massive dreadnought plowed straight through the flames, its guns still firing, its engines howling like a beast refusing to die. The enemy faltered. From the flagship Indomitable, command signals pulsed out like a heartbeat, steady and unshakable. Human destroyers cut into enemy flanks, shredding their formations with brutal precision. Squadrons of bombers darted past defenses, planting charges along capital ships that exploded seconds later, splitting them open like fruit. Every maneuver was ruthless. Every strike was calculated. Humanity fought not like an empire, but like survivors of a death world, each ship carrying the same will to endure or perish, trying. On the refugee stations, alien eyes watched in shock. They had seen battles before, seen empires rise and fall, but nothing like this. The humans did not fight for territory or conquest. They fought with a fury that felt personal, as though every loss in the galaxy was their own. The enemy began to break. One of their massive carriers collapsed under a barrage of kinetic strikes, its core detonating in a blinding explosion that consumed dozens of nearby ships. Panic rippled through their fleet. For the first time in history, the predators retreated, but the humans did not let them run. The Deathworlder fleet pressed forward, relentless. Human warships moved like hunters closing the trap. Smaller enemy vessels tried to flee, but destroyers hunted them down. Larger warships attempted to regroup, but dreadnoughts hammered them into dust. It was slaughter. The flagship Indomitable led the charge, its main gun firing a beam of energy so powerful it cracked enemy flagships in a single shot. Each time it roared, another predator fell silent. Its escorts protected its flanks, trading their lives without hesitation to keep it moving forward. Inside the alien council chamber, silence filled the air. Leaders stared at the live feeds, unable to speak. They had begged for help, and now they were watching the fury of humanity unleashed. Some felt hope, others felt terror, but all of them knew one truth. The galaxy would never forget this day. Hours passed, though to those watching it felt like minutes. When the battle finally began to slow, the enemy fleet was no more. What had once been an unstoppable force was now shattered wreckage drifting through the void. Fire and debris painted the stars red, a graveyard of ships stretching for light years. The Deathworlder fleet had not just won. They had destroyed the enemy utterly. The last surviving predators fled into the darkness, leaving their dead behind. Humanity did not chase them. Not yet. The fleet regrouped, silent and calm, their engines glowing softly as they surrounded the survivors they had come to protect. Then came the final message from the flagship Indomitable, broadcast across every frequency. The threat is broken. You're safe. For now. Safe. For now. The words were both a promise and a warning. The aliens wept. For the first time in generations, they were alive to see another dawn. But deep inside, they also understood the cost of summoning Deathworlders. They had unleashed a storm that could never truly be controlled, and the storm was not finished. The battlefield was silent. Wreckage drifted through the void, broken pieces of enemy warships glowing faintly as they tumbled into the darkness. Fires flickered on shattered hulls, slowly fading as the cold of space swallowed them. What had once been a fleet feared by the galaxy was now nothing more than scattered debris. The predators who had brought entire empires to their knees had been crushed, utterly, completely, by the Deathworlders. For a long moment, no one spoke. The alien survivors on their stations and colonies stared at their screens in disbelief. They had expected a battle that would drag on for weeks, maybe months. Instead, the humans had ended it in a single decisive storm. On the council station, the elder who had first sent the desperate plea leaned heavily on his staff. His eyes shimmered with tears, though his face carried no smile. "It is over," he whispered. "The hunters are gone." But another counselor shook his head, voice trembling. "No, it has only begun. The galaxy has changed forever. Nothing will ever be the same again." He was right. Word of the battle spread faster than light. Across the stars, refugees carried the tale. Smugglers repeated it in shadowed cantinas. Merchants whispered it in marketplaces. Even broken fleets hiding in distant systems heard the story. The Deathworlder fleet had arrived, and the predators had fled. For some, the story brought hope. Civilizations that had been silent for fear of being destroyed now dared to speak again. Colonies in hiding opened their channels, believing that survival was possible. Entire species whispered prayers of thanks to humanity, calling them saviors, protectors, even angels of vengeance. But for others, the story brought only fear. The same whispers repeated again and again. If humanity could destroy the predators, what else could they destroy? Some rulers trembled, knowing their empires had survived only because humanity had chosen not to look their way. The galaxy began to understand that the Deathworlders were no longer a rumor or a distant power. They were here. They were awake. And they were unstoppable. On the flagship Indomitable, the human commander stood before his officers, his voice steady but heavy with meaning. "We have answered the call. The enemy is broken. But this is not the end. They will return, or others like them will rise. When that day comes, humanity will be ready." The officers saluted. None of them spoke of conquest. None of them spoke of glory. They fought because someone had cried for help, and because Deathworlders never ignored a challenge. Among the alien survivors, respect began to grow. They saw humanity not only as destroyers but as guardians who carried both fury and purpose. Yet deep inside, every species understood the cost. Humanity had shown their power, and power always carried a shadow. The galaxy would never again look at Earth the same way. The elder gathered the young survivors in the council chamber. His voice carried across the station as he spoke the truth that would be remembered for generations. "We called for help. We expected death. Instead, we saw hope born in fire. The Deathworlders did not come for conquest. They came because we asked. Let no one ever forget what they did here." The children listened, their wide eyes filled with both fear and admiration. They would grow up telling the tale of the day humanity's fleet answered, and their children after them would tell it again. The story would never fade. On distant worlds, alien historians recorded the battle, calling it the Day of Fire. Others named it the Silence Shattered. But among humans, it would be remembered simply as the response. For humanity did not see themselves as saviors. They saw themselves as fighters who could not ignore the cry of another. As the human fleet prepared to depart, their ships turned slowly, their shadows stretching once more across the stars. The survivors watched them go, hearts heavy with gratitude and unease. The enemy was gone, but the presence of the Deathworlders lingered like thunder after a storm. The final message from the Indomitable echoed across the channels, steady and unshaken. "You are not alone. Remember that." And then, like ghosts, the fleet vanished back into the void, leaving silence behind. But it was not the silence of fear anymore. It was the silence of change. The galaxy would never forget the day aliens cried out for help, and humanity's deadliest fleet responded. Because, on that day, the stars themselves learned a new truth. When Deathworlders moved, the universe trembled.